Welcome to the Navigating Disruption podcast with myself, Mike Klein, and Janet Hitchin. Navigating Disruption is a podcast that aims to help leaders and organizations navigate the disruption that lies ahead. This episode, we speak with Susan Jackson. Susan is head of communications and sustainability for BASF, located outside of Detroit. Having worked her way up through the ranks of this global industrial business, she brings to the comms world a unique perspective and dual passions for sustainability and internal communication. Welcome to the podcast, Susan.
Thank you very much, Mike and Janet. I'm like super excited to be here.
We are excited to have you. We've been talking about having you for a while, and one of the reasons I was particularly interested in inviting you is that it's really rare for a senior communication professional to be someone who's come up through the business, particularly a big global industrial business. Tell us a bit about how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah, I like to tell people that I was a non-traditional communications person because my background, I have a degree in chemical engineering. I'm originally from Louisiana. Go Tigers, go LSU. And that's how I came into BASF. BASF is a chemical company. For those that don't know, we're probably one of the world's leading chemical companies, and anything you can think of, we make something that goes into it. So that's very attractive for an engineer. So I came in that way about 30 years ago and have done a lot of different things: engineering, project management, environmental health and safety. I went back to school, got my MBA, and then moved into more of the business side, product management, sales. And it kind of happened by accident. I mean, I think you have to be a good communicator in general. And when I was doing marketing and launching a product, I didn't have a lot of communications resources. So I started doing some of these things
Hmm.
myself just because I said, okay, you know what? Where are my customers? How am I going to get my messages out to them? I need a website. Maybe I should be talking to magazines. I need to go to trade fairs. So I started doing this for one of the product lines that I was promoting and decided I liked it and was helping other people in marketing who also didn't have those communication resources. And probably about around 2011, a position opened up that was marketing communications. And someone sent it to me and said, "This is what you're doing on the side. You have a time that you should do it. You should do it full time."
You might
Um,
as well go pro.
might as well go for it. And actually, when I interviewed for the business leader at the time, was like, "But you're an engineer. You've been on the business side." And I said, "But this is a benefit for you because
Mm,
I can do both things,
huge.
right? I understand the technology. I know what the
Yeah.
business is up to, and apparently, what people tell me, I can communicate it properly. So it's a win-win for you." So that's how it started, and then it just grew from there. I mean, I'm not one to say that I know everything, so I'm always also talking to people who are professionals in the communications field, talking to different people and like learning what I didn't know, honing the craft, getting connected with professional organizations just to make sure that I knew what was up and what the trends were. But I really like it, and I like the both sides. That okay, I understand the technology. I can talk to my technical people and say, okay, you're very excited about this innovation, but let's break it down so that a 5-year-old can figure it out. So
I
that's how I got.
absolutely I absolutely love that because there's that thing, isn't there, when sort of people come to you and you think, I can see that this is great. I can see this is really cool. But if I was to talk to my mum about this, she would not have a clue what you are talking about.
Right.
So, how can we make it accessible? How can we, if I can understand it, then anyone can. I always take it from that perspective. I'm like, if you can make me understand it, we're good. But yeah, you've got that in. You've got that in to be able to kind of go, guys, people, friends,
Yeah,
we
but
need
then
we need to work on this.
you also have that credibility with the technical people because you're like, I
Mm.
understand why we're geeking out here. I understand. I understand the nerdiness of it, and it's fantastic. But let's try to, simplify it just a wee bit so that you can really make an impact. You can get more of what you need. We can help you get more money to promote it. You can do X, Y, Z
Mm.
just by changing a few words. So,
I find it really interesting in a period where sort of in the last couple of years we've been talking a lot about how we need communicators to have business acumen. We need them to understand what's going on in the business. And you're like, that's up front and central. Like, I've got a t-shirt with it written on. What else do you need from me? And I find that I found it really inspiring. Mike, I don't know about you.
Oh, I think it's really cool as well. I guess one issue that's in the back of my mind, because I'm talking about people with it all the time, is the actual business case for communication.
mhm.
To what extent do you feel that you have to present a business case to your leadership, or that that's implied because of the credibility that you already have? Or how do you get, your stakeholders to buy into what you're doing?
I mean, the business case always has to be there. I think you have to build that credibility. And I try to do that with communications professionals that are on my team, saying, okay, this is why I want you to be part of the leadership team. This is why I want you to be understanding and talking to marketing and sales about why they're doing what they're doing. Because the more that we can tie things to their business growth, the easier it is to get approval. I don't have to fight as much anymore
Hmm.
to say, okay, well, this is why we need to do things this way. But I mean, even today with the leadership team that I sit on and my business leaders, I'm always making that connection. It never goes away, but now that
Okay.
they know, they're like, okay, Susan understands what we're trying to do. Susan understands like that these are like
Mm.
the top three priorities, and the things that she's doing, she can link to it.
Yeah.
And so when she comes to us and says, okay, I need X amount of money and we're going to go to this event and here's why we're going to do this. You're trying to grow in the sector. This is an event where the key people are going to be there. And if we do these things, if we're going to have these talks, and here's how we can promote it externally with digital campaigns, and here's how we can tell our employees why we're doing these things, it definitely makes it easier. So, business case is super important, and I definitely stress that to my team and to, up and coming communications people that like you really have to understand what are the challenges the business are facing because that just makes you more impactful with coming up with your solutions.
Mm.
No, that makes a ton of sense. Um, I want to walk back a bit to a conversation that we had at IABC World Conference in Chicago last year. And you said something around the two things that you were most interested in your role were sustainability and internal communication. I thought, given the range of what you deal with external, you deal with public affairs, you deal with internal and sustainability. Why you picked those two?
Well, if we start with sustainability, so I work at BASF and the particular business that I'm a part of, we call performance materials, but that's just a fancy way to say we're dealing with plastics and foam. And so, plastics, everything, that's a hot topic. It's been a hot topic for a while. You know, UN plastics treaty negotiations, you see pictures of plastics where it's not supposed to be. And we don't want that to happen. Plastics have a lot of value. So the topic of sustainability is very important from that perspective because my business is focused on the entire life cycle, circularity, the plastics journey. So a lot of focus on what are we doing to be smarter with our designs, what kind of recycling technology are we coming up with that, keeps the plastic out of where it's supposed to be? How do we extend the life, the use phase? So we've actively been working on that for a long time. But what's clear is that how do you talk about it? How do you make sure that all the value partners along the value chain, government agencies, NGOs, your suppliers, the consumers, us, how do they know what we're doing and how do they know that we're doing the right thing? So that's the sustainability part. That's why that's important. For the internal side, it's not that external communication isn't important. That's going to be part of it. But you have to bring your employees along with you, right? We're people, right? We work wherever we're working, you're working someplace and you want to know that you're working for people who are doing the right thing. You want to understand how your actions are making an impact. So I also want to make sure that I'm talking to the employees and saying and being transparent, like the whole business. Like we want to be transparent and authentic and tell you this is what we're doing. These are the challenges that we're facing. but here's where we're making progress, and here's where you can help us, so that they too can be ambassadors. I mean, like your employees are like your best ambassadors in talking about the great things that you're working on, and they can convince their neighbors. They can talk to their community leaders. They can talk to their government officials. So for me, there's a link between both. If your employees are not with you, if they don't understand your strategy, what you're trying to achieve, then I don't feel like companies can be successful.
It's really interesting listening to you talk about sort of the sustainability piece, particularly the design piece. I think one of the best things I ever learnt about was cradle to cradle design, and this whole concept of actually how can you make sure that everything stays within that loop, and it just you continue to work that through. And I had this kind of little light bulb moment of, well, why wouldn't everything be like that? And then you realize, because it's not, because that's not how it's been developed.
It's
Is
not
that
how
the
things
sort of
are. Yeah.
is that the sort of things that you're talking to your teams about? Is it with your people? Are you at an education place, or are you at where are you in that kind of sort of journey? I hate the journey word, but
I
let's
know.
use it. Yeah. Mm.
We love our journey, hashtag no plastic journey. I mean, it's a true statement. And I would say we're kind of this is how do I phrase this so I'm not education is always there. Sustainability, I mean, it's a nebulous word. You can say sustainability and ask, five people what sustainability means, and they're going to say like five different things.
Completely.
So education is key for our employees and for people who are not our employees, but everybody else.
Yeah.
Because what does it mean to us,
Mm.
right? Is it about, of course, we're trying to lower CO2 emissions. Um, we're focused on circularity. We want to make a smarter product. So we're
Yeah.
we're in all phases.
Mm.
Um, and we want people to understand that it's not easy. It's not
Yeah.
easy to for circularity. It's not easy. Sustainability is not easy topics. Um, but things can be solved if we work together. We also want people to understand that like, okay, we have responsibility and we know what we want to do as a company, and we take ownership of that. But we also want our employees and others to know, here are the things that we can do, but not everything we can do ourselves. And
Yeah.
we need partners, we need governments to understand that, hey, if you make a regulation in one state, if I take the United States, 50 states, you make a regulation only in California, you know, that doesn't really help us if like 10 other states are going to do something completely different.
Yeah.
Because what's the impetus for business to invest? If they said, okay, if I invest here, but somebody tomorrow will change the regulation, that's not
Yeah.
useful. So it's education is always a big part. In fact, like I'm having a team meeting, or I had a team meeting earlier this week where we were talking about, okay, what are going to be the things that we're going to focus on with our employees in 2025? How are we going to set things up to make it easy to find for people to find out what they need to know and then keep updated,
Yeah. Yeah.
and keep ourselves updated because things are changing. So it's education, but on that circularity and that design piece, we have a lot of very intelligent, very brilliant R&D people who are constantly working with each other. But then we also do a lot with university consortiums and other people
Okay.
to say, okay, how
Yeah.
are we coming up with that next greatest design, next greatest technology, recycling technologies? There's
Yeah.
recycling technologies that exist today, but we know that 2 years from now there may be something better. There will be something better. And how are
Yeah.
we supporting that innovation? Who
Yeah.
are we partnering with? Who's the next smartest person that's going to come and like come with something new?
Hello, thanks for tuning in to another episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love your support in helping us reach more listeners. The best way to do that is hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. It's completely free and means you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's content, we'd love you to take a second to leave us a rating or a review. Your support really makes a difference in helping others discover this podcast. Plus, it lets us know what resonates with you so we can keep bringing you more of what you care about. Thanks and take care from me, Janet in London, and Mike in Iceland.
So
It's the partnership thing, isn't it? The partnership thing is huge.
mhm.
And I hadn't actually thought about it from the state's perspective where, as you say, California agrees, but then actually if Kansas is doing something completely different, you're like, oh, okay, and it's the complexity of that
Mhm.
collaboration. I was at, small sidebar, I was at a play that has it's a new play by the Royal Shakespeare Company. And it's all about, sounds really boring because it's all about the Kyoto Agreement
Mhm.
so the third COP, which you think, how can that be possibly interesting? But the tension and the drama of humans' ability to collaborate and work together and partner, it was extraordinary. And it was one of the most gripping things I've seen for a while, new pieces that I've seen for a while. And I thought, this is actually if you think about it, this is what we're looking at and we're working with every day, but just on a very, a much smaller kind of perspective. We've not got 170 different countries that we need to get to agree to the same thing. And we don't necessarily need to have unanimity and consensus, but it's the same concepts. And you just made me think of that. I think
No, no, no. I mean, just imagine even like you with your friends, trying to figure out where you're going to eat for dinner,
yeah,
or
exactly.
or heaven forbid, like, oh, we all want to go on a vacation. Where are we going to go? Think about the complexities of some of that with an even smaller
Yeah,
group, on a non-divisive topic,
yeah.
and sometimes how difficult that can be, and then like amplify it.
Hmm. It's quite something.
In terms of circularity, one of the challenges that keeps coming up in my mind is there's a lot of communication out there about plastic recycling and the extent to which plastic recycling is even a real phenomenon. There's stuff saying only 5% of plastics get recycled, you know, and I imagine that this kind of permeates even your employee community. What are you saying about that, and where are we at with plastic recycling at the moment?
Well, for sure, the recycling rates are not where anyone wants them to be. That is very much a true statement. So in terms of like of how I communicate or how we communicate, BSF communicates, the industry communicates, I'm truthful. Yes,
Hmm.
it's correct. The recycling rates are not where we want them to be. Recycling is real. It does happen.
Hmm.
The challenges are regulatory, infrastructure. Uh, we talk about the different states. If I take the United States,
Yeah.
there's no federal law consistent law on recycling. Uh,
Really?
there's not. There,
Okay.
the infrastructure's not in place. I mean, if I take where I live in Michigan, and I have recycling containers, right? But not all the plastics can be recycled, right? So I put my stuff in there. If the wrong stuff's in the container, when it gets to the sorting facility, if it's not the right stuff, some of it just gets tossed,
Hmm.
right? So they don't have the proper sorting. Is not set
Hmm.
up the right way. Um, and I know you both are over in Iceland and I think in mainland Europe, different setup, right? I've been to Germany where it's very clear where things are supposed to go and the sorting is set up, and this it's not that way in the United States. Some states are doing certain things. So that's part of the challenge. People want to recycle. People want to do the right thing, but it's hard. It's not straightforward. Uh, Even when you look at some of the containers and like, okay, you look sometimes you're like, can I recycle this? Is this something that can be recycled? Because you just
Yeah.
can't throw everything in there, and then the facilities don't have a way to properly sort it. So that's one of the challenges. If the sorting's not set up, if the recycling and sorting facilities don't have the technology, don't have the bandwidth, don't have the manpower, um, and it's not required, right? What's the incentive? I mean, that's why you talk about these EPR, extended producer responsibility schemes. Like, how do you incentivize people to do the right thing, get the money that you need to make sure that the infrastructure set up with the right sorting so that recycling rates can be increased? Because for sure, companies like ours, many companies, we see the value in what's not being recycled and we want it back. We want it back. But
Yeah.
how do you do that? I mean, like, I can't fund an infrastructure set up for an entire country myself, right? You
Yeah.
need that partnership with government agencies, with the value chain partners. So that's part of the challenges, which seems like it should be an easy thing to say, okay, duh, we want to recycle more. How do we make this happen? But it's not so easy. As you're talking about with your play, you get people with other desires, other things they want to do. Politics, fortunately or unfortunately, sometimes can play a role. Um, so advocacy is also part of sustainability, and also part of my role, where I'm part of industry associations, working on, okay, how do we create messaging that's going to resonate with the government, with NGOs, with the general public, so that they understand, okay, this is what we're doing and this is what we need to happen, and how can we work together. So it's not an easy topic, but we push through. I push through, we push through, and just continue moving forward, trying to be authentic, be transparent. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it for people,
No.
but
I think what's really interesting is you just made me think about when I lived in Tokyo for a short time earlier in another lifetime, and recycling was taken so seriously.
it's so clean over there.
That so key. I mean, and it's because it's a small island and only a certain small percentage of that small island is inhabitable. So they're like, let's keep this clean. We got to keep this because we don't have much of it. So actually, let's respect that. And I do distinctly remember moving into a building and we didn't know what to do with our rubbish. And somebody was watching us because, obviously we kind of, blonde hair, pale skin, I stand out quite a lot in Japan. And they came down and she just explained to us. I couldn't speak Japanese, she couldn't speak English, but we worked it out, and she explained where you needed to put things in order to recycle, and it was taken extremely seriously, which made me wonder about the cultural aspect of that as well, and how does that kind of play into some of the work that you're doing internally as well.
I mean, for sure, it's definitely a cultural thing, and if it's something that you grew up with doing,
Mm.
like
Yeah,
it was part of the country city culture,
yeah.
that probably makes things a lot easier.
Mm.
And yes, it's not necessarily the culture that we have currently in the United States, but I think it's something that we can develop.
Mm.
And so, what am I doing specifically with my business? I'm taking it one site at a time. Like, I have responsibility. I think it's 13-ish sites uh,
Ooh.
uh, in North America, and I'm starting with one where we're saying, okay, what do we do here, right? What are our waste streams? Because we are doing things, right? But like,
Yeah,
let's do an audit. What are we doing? And then how do we make sure that our employees understand, hey, we are doing things, and here's how you can contribute. So it's like, how do you build that culture by making people feel like, okay, I can contribute, and I'm already doing things. Like, we're already doing things, and we're doing this assessment, and then kind of seeing if there are gaps to say, okay, well, is there a better way we can do this? Um, so I'm doing it because I said, like, okay, I can look at all of the sites that I'm responsible for and kind of just say, okay, well, what are we doing? Right? We're talking to our customers. We have our product side, our product portfolio, but what about like the tangible, real stuff? Like, I sit in this office and I see that we recycle uh, aluminum cans, plastic bottles. What are we doing with our coffee? What do we
yeah,
do with our paper? What are we doing with our cardboard? So I'm trying to balance and also have like the tangible things that people can see where they work,
yeah,
and help build that culture to say, okay, look, we're doing good things. Let's continue to do it. Let's be proud of it. And then, maybe let's take some of that cultural culture and take it outside, take it back to our house, take it back to our neighborhood. Because I think you have to do both ways, right? You can
yeah,
have like top down regulations, top down, hey, this is
yeah,
what we do, but you kind of also need that bottom up with people who believe in it, who are passionate about it, who can see the value,
yeah,
and then kind of help spread the word. So
Is
that's
there
kind of
is
my
there an
approach.
eye is there an eye towards taking that, for lack of a better term, grassroots participation from the actual act of recycling itself into advocacy for your sustainability agenda with their political and community stakeholders? 'Cause it strikes me that there's an obvious opportunity here.
Well, and I would say from our advocacy groups, we are trying to do both ways. Right, we're targeting certain areas, and there's activities going on in certain cities already, like grassroots, where we're taking that to say, okay, here's an example. In Houston, there's like a recycling consortium, and some of the chemical companies, plastic companies are working with this consortium to make it easier for people who live in Houston to bring their recycled material to it. So we are having some, I would say, proof points
Yeah.
that we are bringing to say, okay, this is working here, and we could do this in other places if we had this kind of support. So I would say yes, it's both, and we're realizing that we need to do more of the bottom up along with the top down approach because okay, it's very difficult to hit everybody the same way. So now it's about how can we focus on the right places, on the right areas to really make the most impact.
Want to explore the burning questions your C suite and clients are asking? Then you should consider the next Navigating Disruption Mastermind. Janet and I will challenge and coach you in an 8 session program. You'll join other Navigating Disruption listeners and other senior comms pros. For more information, follow the Navigating Disruption page on LinkedIn.
It's really interesting that you called it grassroots. I'm reading the book Tribal by Michael Morris at the moment. I think Mike, I've conned
I
you
am
into
also
trying to
reading
read.
that book.
I think I'm way ahead. Mike keeps saying to me, "Oh, I can't read anymore." But it's really interesting that in the section, I'm at the third section, which is talking about how do you create tribal ripples, and they talk about grassroots movements and how do you use grassroots movements for those tribal ripples. Is that something that you kind of consider? So do you actually sort of sit back and look at what are the human behaviors? Are you getting into that kind of behavioral psychology around this, or is it more gut instinct and actually what feels right, and what you're learning from other companies that are doing the same sort of thing? Or is it a mixture of both?
I will say it's probably a mixture of both. I mean, I
Okay.
think I think I see what's going on, and it's all about people and how people
Yeah.
behave and how people are going to engage.
Yeah.
And I look at it and say, okay, well, what's going to move the needle? What
Mm.
are different ways that we can help people move the needle? Because as you said, and now I want to read this book, um, you have to appeal to people's emotions. Right? There's the logic side of like why something is good to do, but people also have to feel it and
Hmm.
feel good about it, feel like they're changing something. So I definitely think that behavioral benefit comes into play. But I would say yes, it's probably married with my gut where I'm like, okay,
Yeah, this feels
this
right.
seems to make sense. It seems to make sense. I've seen it in other places. Uh Listening to other people who are also involved in it. It's very fun being here in Metro Detroit because there's a large community of people who really want to change the city, who want to come up with new ways to help like underrepresented areas, with like solar panels. Let's do this, community gardens. You have that
Yeah.
type of community feel.
There's an energy
There's
to
an
it, isn't there?
energy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That I find inspiring. And so
Mm.
it helps me think of like, how can I apply this kind of energy and thinking in my corporate world?
Yeah, it sounds. I think you should read the book.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
pretty good.
there's some discussions in there about, and I'm thinking back to the Japanese example I gave. That would be sort of an ancestor
Hmm.
instinct, and the ancestor instinct is I must keep, I must keep my space clean and tidy. I must look
Right.
after my space because I don't have enough of it. And they talk about sort of peer instinct, which is peer pressure. So hey, they're doing it over there, we should do it too.
Too.
But also hero pressure and the hero instinct. What's the where who and how all of those different instincts play depending on what you're actually looking at,
Hmm.
be it culturally, be it the actual sort of thing that is actually happening, be it the type of people that you have there, be it the context that they're living in. So yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of hear you talking about that actually coming to life and in realities, because this book is great, but it's also very academic.
Okay.
So yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I will
And,
put it on
and I
my.
think given the comment about the book being academic. I'd like to see a bit more conversation about practicality, particularly in terms of the what you're doing from an internal comms perspective. Particularly, I know sustainability is at the heart of what you do, but looking more broadly beyond sustainability. Um, tell me about your internal dynamics, what's going on, what your footprint's like, um,
Okay, I guess
what your
we have a
broader
we have a we
IC
have we
issues
have
are
a
at
we
the
have an
moment.
internal community, a large internal presence that I have to manage. If you're talking about practicality, okay, that we have some of the typical channels, right? We have lovely email, which everybody loves. We have uh we're part of the Microsoft family, Office tools. We have a employee newsletter. Um, but I also am a bigger believer in talking face to face to people.
Mm.
So we have our town halls, but also our leaders are traveling to the sites,
Mm.
um, our site leaders. So making sure that they have the right information to tell the message in their own way, right? If you have like a large group of people, 500 plus, email's not always going to work. Some people are never going to come to your town halls, right? Because they're not all together. So you can't only depend on that. So it's also about making sure that those leaders talk the talk, that they have the same talking points, that they're saying the same message, that I and my communications team, that we're giving them content, great visual content, written content, where they know, okay, well, here are the messages. But then some of it has to come from them. If you're talking
Yeah.
about a topic like sustainability, sure, I can give you information on like here's what sustainability means, here are our products, here's this. But it means a lot more if they can take it themselves and say, you know what, this is why we're doing this. I recycle because I believe in this. Our product is great because it lowers the carbon, it has a lower product carbon footprint than this product. It's reducing the CO, if we look at our operations and we're switching to renewable energy, this is helping our carbon footprint. This is helping the world. I'm making the
Yeah.
world a better place for my family, my friends. So it's also about that transparency and authenticity of the leader being comfortable in presenting that message, right? So okay, email is only going to go so far, but it's a channel. We have digital signage. We have town halls. We have our newsletters. But in the
It's
end,
all of them. Yeah.
it's
All of them together.
What's
it's
your
all of them together.
what's
And then
your
oh, sorry, go ahead.
what's your breakdown of kind of HQ white collar staff versus production staff versus
Most, I mean, like
field staff, and how does that impact your approach to internal comms?
our manufacturing footprint is larger than our white collar footprint, right? And so that is always a constant topic of discussion. How are we reaching the people in the plants? And are
Yeah.
we doing enough to reach them the right way? Uh,
Yeah.
and it's still a work in progress. To be perfectly honest, it's still a work in progress. Um, but we're having a closer relationship all the time with our operations leadership team. And they're in the midst of doing a strategy, operation strategy, and we're going to help them turn it into a communication strategy to roll out in different ways. But again, it's going to tie into, once we know it, what's the cadence of communications that we're going to do with them? What are the different channels? And what are the different ways? Because, okay, if you have people in Canada, US, and Mexico, you know,
Yeah.
everybody's not going to come together to be able to talk to them face to face per se. Then it's going to be different ways, different things, but consistent messaging with the leadership of operations, as well as like all the site managers, the plant managers, the shift supervisors. So that's in progress. And we realize we've been getting them, but that we could do a better job of targeting the content uh, so that it links better to them on what they're doing on a daily basis.
Hmm.
But honestly, it's the same conversation with on the white collar side. If I take my commercial folks, marketing, sales, technical, they also have to be armed with information and feel comfortable in
Hmm.
talking about some of these topics with their customers. I have like two sustainability managers working for me, right? They can't be everywhere. They can't go with all the salespeople, all the technical people all the
Yeah.
time. So we also have to have a way to upskill that community so that they're comfortable having like some of the initial conversations with customers about what they're doing for sustainability. So it's the opposite side of the same coin, but to your point, definitely our manufacturing footprint, we have a lot more manufacturing colleagues than white collar, and we are recognizing that we need to develop a specific strategy on how to address them, make sure they're getting the right information. We've been doing some things, trying new things. Like our SVP has done a great job this last year. Sorry, we're in 2025. He started doing podcasts, uh, which have resonated actually with some of the folks in manufacturing. So we're looking at also different ways for them to
Yeah.
like take a few minutes and get some information. So a work in progress, but we are recognizing, or I'm recognizing along with my team, that okay, they're an important part of the organization, and how do we need to reach them? Do they feel like they're getting enough? So we're also talking to them too, like, hey, are you getting enough information? How do you want to learn more about what's going on? So it's a two-way conversation.
I love that bit that you said about, sort of listening to them and not just sort of saying, and also trying things and unexpectedly realizing that they work. So, you might not expect a podcast to work, but actually that might be the best thing that works, because it might be a 15 minutes, and actually 15 minutes is exactly what they've got and is the time that they have. And they're like, I can get everything I need from that. I'm good. Thank you very much. I'm off now. I'm back to work. Toodle pip. So yeah, it's that sort of test and learn and trial. And did you like that? And it's really kind of, it's great to hear that you know you're bringing that to life practically.
I mean, yeah, and I'm not afraid of like trying something and like, oh crap, that
It
didn't.
didn't work.
Oh,
Kill it.
okay,
Let's
move
move on.
on.
It's like, did you like that? No. Okay, we won't do that again.
Won't do that anymore. Okay.
Oh my goodness. Is
Trying
there
to move
anything?
the conversation into a somewhat different direction because it's something that, something's very much on my mind and it's on the mind of a number of people in the space, although it's not uniformly um, embraced, if you will. But corporate credibility and reputational risk are massive issues at the moment. What advice would you give to your fellow communication pros about how to manage that risk
Mm,
and how to make leaders aware of that risk, and particularly the risk of bad communication decisions in the organization?
okay, managing risk, excitement. I mean, in the end, you have to be able to look yourself in the face and say, okay, did I do the right thing? Did we as a company, are we living up to our values? So first, what are your company values? What's important to your company? What's the reputation that they want to put out there, that they have been putting out there? Um, Opinions change, things change quickly, but I feel like if you can pass your own red face tests with, this is what I'm saying, this is what I'm putting out there, and I believe it because this is what we believe, and it's sticking to our values, it's our integrity, if it's what we stand for, then I think in the end you'll be okay. Everything could be misinterpreted. Somebody could take something and totally misinterpret it, and you can't always control that. Um, but that's why you have crisis communication. That's why we as professionals are thinking about, okay, what do we stand for? Thinking ahead to like what are things that could come out of this? What are questions that we might get asked? You also have to think about, okay, what's the worst that could happen? What are some of these questions that we would get asked that would make us be super uncomfortable? And then how do we potentially craft answers to it? Um, are we making sure that our leaders are adequately media trained to be able to deal with that and to learn how to pivot, uh, and to actually learn how to be quiet? Not. I was just talking about this with someone. Like sometimes if there's the uncomfortable silence, who's going to crack first. People feel like they have to add more things in. So making sure people are just prepared to say, hey, these are the answers. This is what it is. Know how to pivot. Know how to go back to your main message about what we're doing. And just be authentic. I mean, I think anybody can take something you say and turn it into something bad. But I personally believe if as long as you're sticking to your values uh, and being true to you and saying, okay, this is what we said we did, this is what we're doing, here's the messaging for it, and it's correct. And of course, make friends with lawyers. Make sure your lawyers are reviewing everything. But I mean, it's crazy right now. I mean, you see things, if you talk about sustainability, something yesterday that somebody said that wasn't viewed as greenwashing, someone's getting sued because they're saying, okay, that's greenwashing. That's a constant thing. So we're constantly having to go back and say, okay, let's look at how we worded this, and then like what's the facts behind it? Like how are we backing up if this comes up? And again, to me, we're still sticking to what we say is always true. We're just now spending a little bit more time to say, okay, do we have some backup facts in case we get challenged? And you could still get challenged. And somebody will look at your backup facts and you're like, ugh, I don't believe you. What are you going to do? All you can do is prepare. All you can do is prepare and stick to your truth. What is true for you, your values. I'm a big believer in being, integrity, transparency. You don't have to agree with
What are
me,
what
but
are
this
what
is
are
what
your
we believe.
corporate values? I'm curious because you talk a lot about them. What are the BASF values?
I mean, our tagline is that we create chemistry for a sustainable future. So we are a chemistry company and we believe in the power of science. Um, we believe in doing the right thing. Sustainability is safety, sustainability, uh, solving the problems of tomorrow, being innovative. I mean, we're a company who've been around for over 150, probably now over 160 years. And anything that you probably have in your life has something to do with a piece of science that we were involved in. But we take the safety of everybody and the safety of what we produce and making sure that it's not harming the world very seriously. And we believe in science and innovation.
Another issue that's kind of in the background, particularly, when you're talking about the United States in general, and you're talking about sustainability in particular, is how do you see political polarization playing in all of this? To the extent that you can discuss it, obviously.
I mean, I don't think we're getting away from the fact that politics are polarizing. And I don't see it changing. Um, we know that things are going to change with the new administration that's going to be coming, I think next week through the inauguration. And so we have to wait and see to see, okay, what does that mean in terms of regulations? How's that going to impact some of the things that we're doing? You know, what are the tariffs, the potential tariffs going to do? Is that going to make things easier or harder? Potentially harder with investments and how some of the industries will develop in this country. From a sustainability perspective, we suspect, I mean, I suspect, okay, some of the things that the US was driving prior, that's probably going to change. Uh, the polarization, I don't think is going away. And I think we just have to deal with it as it comes. And I think with some of the industry associations that we're working with and some of the advocacy topics, we're already trying to anticipate. Okay, well, who are going to be the people that we have to talk to if we're trying to look at recycling technology legislation, right? And then like what it doesn't change what we're going to try to do. It may change the way that we approach. Is there more focus on the jobs that it's going to bring to the United States if we push this kind of legislation through compared to more talk about how better for the environment this would be. For example, both things are true, but depending on who
Yeah.
you're talking about,
It-
you're
yeah.
emphasizing one part of the message versus the other. So,
I mean, it's ultimately about doing business, right? It's about doing good business.
right.
And I think that's what's really interesting in the tech conversation that's happening at the moment. So, Meta, Amazon are saying, right, we're pushing back on our DE&I, and Apple have gone, yeah, well, we're good, thanks. Actually, we're making money as we are, so we don't need to do that. And I think it's about, there's almost a sense of, just watching what Larry Fink is doing in his CEO newsletter. I know he hasn't put his January newsletter out yet. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen
Mhm.
there, because BlackRock has just pulled out of the, the Net Zero, is it Alliance Initiative? I can't remember what the last word of that thing is. But he's been slowly moving towards, actually, let's not talk about ESG, let's not talk about sustainability, let's talk about risk.
Mhm.
And actually, are you managing your business risk?
Right.
And if you're managing your business risk, is that good for your business? And what exactly is what you've just said? We could talk about it in one way, so we could talk about it in a lovely way, but actually, that's not what some people want to hear. Some people want to hear, is this going to be about, are you still going to be a profitable business? Are
Right.
you still going to be in business in a year's time? Yes. Right. Talk about it in that way. And suddenly everyone's fine with whatever it is, whatever single thing it is you're doing, but it's how you've talked about it and how you framed it,
Right.
and you navigate through. And I think that's sort of what's interesting about the tech piece that's kind of come up recently.
But I still think I think that's true in all industries. I mean,
Hmm.
we're companies, and companies want to be profitable and make
Yeah,
money and pay their employees and pay their stockholders. So we're still focused on sustainability, but we want to partner with the right people and find applications and technologies and solutions that are going to make money.
yeah, because
I
that is
think this is
ultimately good for your business and will keep you in business for another 125 years.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really interesting when people get very kind of this the green lash that started to happen, which I saw an article in the Financial Times at the end of 2024, and it was the word is so new that even autocorrect on my phone was just no, sorry, don't recognize this as. It kept telling me, no, you're talking about greenwash. No, I'm not. I'm talking about green lash. Completely different thing. But you see these sorts of things happening. You see, we've been through these almost cycles of there was greenwash. People went out going, yay! Then there was green hush. We're now terrified. Don't say anything to anybody. Don't talk about it. Yes, we know it's good. Just don't say anything because we're scared. And now you've got this kind of concept of green lash where people are expecting certain things to happen within with it politically.
Right.
And actually, you're not sure because Apple has, I can't remember what exactly Tim Cook said, but essentially it was, we're making money, our business is fine, we don't need to remove anything or add anything,
Hmm.
we're good, thanks.
Right.
And I thought I thought that was really interesting in this simple framing. Is it good for business?
Yeah.
And if we're no longer talking about is it good for the planet, but just as a lovely byproduct, it happens to be brilliant for the planet and better for the planet, fine. Keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the framing. I mean, like inclusion, DE&I is good for business.
Yeah. Well, it's diversity of thought is surely good for business.
And
We've
really,
got enough.
the inclusive part. I mean, like
Yeah.
you need different people thinking different ways who are doing different things,
Hmm.
right? How are you going to innovate? How are you going to innovate and find that next new idea if you're talking to the same people all the time?
Yeah, it's that. I mean, Matthew Said's book, Rebel Ideas. I don't know if you know that book.
Hmm.
It's utterly brilliant, and it perfectly shows how simply by having some diversity of thought, and that doesn't mean it means that you could look exactly the same, but you just think in very different ways. But having that complete kind of diverse people, diverse thinking, all of that, bringing that together, actually means that you can avoid groupthink. You can avoid things like the Abilene effect,
Hmm.
where everybody just makes the same decision because everybody assumes that everybody else in the room wants to make that decision, and actually nobody in the room wants to make that
Right.
decision, but they're just all going along with it because nobody can be bothered to have the conversation. And I think there's that just it just makes sense to me. Like, why would you not want to have those competencies like standing alone, standing up for an idea, having your own personal opinion that actually creates richer and better solutions for your company,
And why
which
wouldn't you?
strengthens your company.
And why wouldn't you want to reflect the actual state of the world? Right?
Yeah,
If you're making a new if you're
yeah,
making a new service, a new product, a new technology, why wouldn't you want it to reflect the
100%.
actual composition of your market? Right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want people who reflect your market to give you insight into whether or not this is a good idea and how to make it more successful? That's the part that seems very basic to me. And I
Yeah.
don't understand the hype around it, but I'm like, okay, this seems very straightforward.
But
It feels like a no-brainer, doesn't it?
yeah, but it's a common problem that we face in the comms world where the senior stakeholders think they're the customers. I mean, particularly where you've got this lack of diversity, they
Right.
think that it's all about them at the end.
Yeah, no, that can be a problem, and that's part of I think the role of the communications, well, also marketing, but sometimes communications and marketing are working hand in hand to say, okay, this is how you develop when you're developing that business case, where you're developing um, that case, you have to bring that kind of information to them and say, okay, you think this way, but here's actually what's going on. Here's actual data from it's not just a feel. This is not just your gut feel. This is actual data. Um, and I think that's part of our job is to make sure
Yeah.
that the leaders are seeing that kind of information and not just what they think, their feel. They woke up and said, okay, this is what is the truth.
It's really interesting. It reminds me of a time when I was working for an organization, and we were launching a product. And to run the operations on that product launch, I brought somebody in from one of the stores. And I remember there was something quite operation. He was running the operational piece because he understood how it worked.
Hmm.
So he understood what you needed to tell the people in stores, how you needed to tell them so they could do what they needed to do. And I remember him coming to me and saying, I've just received this thing from one of our partners. And actually, when that lands, nobody's going to understand what it means. And I said, okay, well, how would you do it? And he said, oh, I would change this. I would change. I was like, okay, change it and tell them. Oh, I can't tell them. I was like, why not? This is the bit. This is the communications bit. Like, this is the bit. This is what we do.
Hmm.
What we do is not just take stuff and post it on. What we do is go back to them. And you particularly, because you are somebody who's worked in the store, so you've worked more recently than they have or seen,
Hmm.
you can give them that information. So you say, I know that the people in my team would not understand that. Here's what I would recommend so that your information flows faster. You get the result that you want. People do what you were asking them to do. And you sort of saw this light bulb moment happen with him. He went, I can do that. And I was like, of course you can. That's why you're here. Please help me do that because I can't do that, but you can. And what you've got is incredibly powerful, and it's more powerful than what any of the rest of us here sat in our, like, please use that. That's absolutely. And by empowering him to do that, suddenly some of that stream of operational communication suddenly was working way more brilliantly than it ever had because he understood how it was going to be received, so he knew how to twist it and change it and tweak it, and it was glorious to see. But it yeah, it kind of reminds me of, oh, what
That's
you need to do
brilliant.
is no, what I need to do is not.
No, no, that's brilliant, and I and, and
Mm,
I and I think that's something that's an important message for communication people is to be willing to say, hey, I came up with this, but can you take a look at it? It's funny. You just made me think about the education part of sustainability, right? Because, like, of course, we come up with our own stuff and we say, okay, here's what people need to know.
yeah.
And then you present it to somebody. And then they make faces. Mhm, mhm. So I'm a big proponent of like saying, look, if it sucks or if it's not clear, you know, tell me. Tell me which part's not clear. Tell me what you need. right?
Yeah.
'Cause,
Tell me
tell
what
me
factually does not work here. Yeah.
tell me the storyline. Tell me what's missing. Right? Because like when you go to a customer and they ask you this and they said, "Oh, Susan, well, this didn't work. Like this is too wordy. I need." I'm like, "Okay, this is what I need,
Yeah.
to help make it better for you because like you have to talk about it. You have to deliver it.
Yeah.
How would you in your own what in your own words would make this sound better?" So I
Mm.
mean, I love this, and that's to me that's part of like it's the feedback loop.
It's that iteration piece, isn't it? It's the collaboration, which we're, kind of bringing us kind of full circle to collaborating. It's that collaboration piece and how can you work together? It's not a, hey, here's my homework. Can you please cover it in red pen so that I
Right.
feel like, I've not done a good job. That's not what we're here for. It's, did I get the facts right? Is there a fact that is actually missing? Please don't change that and to a but because that's not, again, that's not what we're here for. I mean, I love that idea of them saying, actually, it's a bit too wordy and I'm not able to that's not feeling right. Can we change that? Can we tweak that? And then that becomes a partnership. Then that feels like trusted partnership, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Which is brilliant. And I don't know, Mike, should we end on trusted partnership? Because that seems really, really positive place to start.
We would end on brilliant. We like brilliant around here.
We like trusted, brilliant partnerships.
Absolutely.
Look, we're all awesome with our trusted brilliant partnership. There you go.
I mean, seriously.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you very much for coming, Susan. This has been an outstanding conversation.
Thank you both for
And
having
in
me.
a couple of moments, Janet and I will wrap this up with our take on the conversation.
Thank you.
So, some parting thoughts on the conversation we had with Susan Jackson.
I thought Susan was great. I really like talking. I mean, as you know, I love sustainability, and sustainability is one of my sort of passion pieces. And I thought she was great. I really liked her conversation about collaboration. I really liked how they're talking about how they're trying to get employees involved, how they're constantly listening to employees. Considering how to sort of align and refine narratives so that they can make sure that it works authentically with customers, trying to figure out how to get messaging out to the factories in an authentic way, and using things and trying stuff, and if it doesn't work, not being afraid to say, you know what, that didn't work, let's just move on. That was so refreshing to hear, because sometimes people kind of go, no, I'm going to double down because that's the budget line and that's what I've spent, and I can't not do that. So that kind of test and learn, try stuff, try figure it out, incredibly pragmatic and with a real sense of calm, and I thought it was a great conversation.
Yeah, I thought it was a great conversation too. I mean, a couple of things that struck me. I think her background, being a chemical engineer who came up through this massive global industrial business, who is as fluent and fluid of a communication leader as you're ever going to find pretty much anywhere.
It's hugely inspiring. Hugely
Very,
inspiring.
very inspiring. I mean, and it's also kind of indicative of the nature of our profession, that most people, particularly on the internal side, and certainly, maybe even on the public affairs side as well, don't do this because we wanted to do this as children. This is stuff that we've kind of, eased into or blundered into or bumbled into. And what's amazing with Susan is just simply how much of a pro she is. Given the fact that she got her start as a chemical engineer.
Yeah, no, I found that hugely inspiring. And if that does not underline that you need to understand the business, I don't know what does.
No, exactly. I mean,
yeah.
she doesn't have a problem with it because, because she can, she's trained in talking the talk as well as walking the walk.
Brilliant. No, I hope everybody enjoys this and gets from it as much as we did. I really enjoyed this conversation.
I agree. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.